So, the translations are out for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 341, and let me just say this is a villain-centered chapter, and we'll get more into the villains in this review. But first, right after this, Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Drew, and I'm here to do my review of My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 341, titled The Story of How We All Became Heroes, -1. Yeah, as I said in the intro, this is going to be a villain-centered chapter where specifically we're focusing on the individuals that were a part of the League of Villains, as well as the Paranormal Liberation Army, and there's a lot that needs to be discussed in this chapter. A lot of discussion videos may be made on this chapter, but before we get into those discussions, I have to go through the review, and there's a lot to go over in this chapter in just the review alone. So before we get into it, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't done so, to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I cover My Hero Academia content, spoilers, discussions, as well as the reviews, just like this one. So if that's something that you're interested in, subscribe to my YouTube channel. And without the way, let's get right into the chapter. So, to start off this review, we're actually going to be covering the title of this chapter and the meaning behind it, because the cover of this chapter pretty much sums up everything that this chapter is going to be about, where we see Toga opening her mouth with her hands covered in blood in her most likely middle school uniform, just showing how crazy she is, and also showing that we are going to be focusing on the villains. But that's not what I want to talk about yet. What I actually want to talk about is the title of the chapter, which is The Story of How We All Became Heroes -1. And you may be wondering, why is it minus? And it's most likely a reference to another mangaka that probably inspired Horikoshi. And the mangaka that I'm talking about is Taite or Tite Kubo, who did the story and the manga of Bleach, where there was a section of the story after chapter 315 that was titled Turn Back the Pendulum Part 1, which actually started off with a negative number of -108. So most likely this is going to be a sort of reference to that. And because if that is a reference to it, most likely this may be the only chapter where we will focus on the villains in this kind of fashion. But the fact that we are still focusing on the villains and getting actually a lot more characterization and potential development for those villains is still amazing, and that this title is most likely just referencing to that work of Bleach and being the inspiration of this. So the only difference between this is that we're actually not going back in time, but going to another side of this war faction, which is the villains. And now that we've talked about the villains, let's talk about the first half of this chapter, which is just a Toga-focused part where we're actually looking at her history. Because the chapter starts off with Toga entering a house with graffiti written on the side of the house, which ironically enough is very similar to what happened with Gentle Criminal with the act that he has done, where we get to see written on the wall, it's born a burden, a vampire demon, as we also have this sort of inner narration as Toga is going through the house, which is most likely of a speech that she was told to by her parents, which is basically saying that she is a demon child and that she was never normal and that she needed to act normal and that we are trying to do this for her sake. Pretty much the general idea of her parents were trying to control her and trying to repress who she actually is, as well as we get probably one of the most disturbing things, in my opinion, that we've ever seen in My Hero Academia involving Toga. Now, let me warn you, when it comes to this chapter, there is self-harm. We do see an image of Toga biting herself on the wrist and bleeding. So if you do have some mental incapacities to view these kinds of things, or if you are uncomfortable with that type of situation, I would actually advise you to potentially skip a few minutes into the video to avoid this. I will show potentially a few images, and I understand I'm very uncomfortable with this myself, but there is something important that needs to be gleaned from this, and I really want to talk about it. So with these two pages, we do see Toga biting her wrist, causing it to bleed, potentially in a vein of like her wanting help with her self-harm, but she's singing a song about it, and the song pretty much is summed up as how she wants to become a red bird, red raven sparrow dancing on her stomach, and that raven begins to dig into her belly button, and how she's very envious of it. And there's probably definitely symbolism with that red raven. Most likely her wanting to consume blood is the symbolism of it, and how digging inside of her is kind of it trying to, if not actually break out, to go back in from where it was coming from, pretty much return back to its origins. Because if it's going into the belly button, that's where you pretty much derived from, where your umbilical cord was, the source of life that gave you your nutrients. It wants to return there. So there's a lot of symbolism that you can really like delve from that the sparrow could represent Toga's mental state, it could represent her quirk, it could represent her wanting to belong, and that she's had to repress this for so long. And it's also seen with her biting her wrist, which could also be a sort of sign of help. So we do get a large focus on Toga and her past, her relationship with her parents, and just more characterization of who her character is through very uncomfortable means. So it's very interesting to see that we're getting a better understanding of her mental state and what she's thinking about, as well as we actually get confirmation in this chapter that she's willing to go down this path of villainy when we get the reintroduction of Dabi in this chapter. And even when it comes to Dabi, we get a lot of characterization with him in this chapter as well, because we get a fun interaction between him and Toga. He calls her a psychopath. She says that it's normal to visit her old home, as you have Toya Dabi asking if she has what it takes to pretty much tear down this society that has been built up by the heroes. To which Toga responds with, she can't go back. And as she says this, you have Dabi just giving this speech about how society, this world doesn't care about them, and that when the sun rises tomorrow, that they'll have a good laugh, as he torches her home, as he says that we're going to be the people that laugh together. As you have Toga thinking that this is like Dabi showing that he cares about her, and Dabi responds with, you may think that, but this all just ties into making Endeavor suffer so much. So we kind of see that Dabi still has those ideals of tearing down society, tearing down heroes in the same vein of Stain, but he's twisted it in a way to use it to make Endeavor suffer specifically. So yeah, pretty much characterizing Dabi's character as doing anything and everything just to make Endeavor suffer, even if it means tearing down society itself to make sure that Endeavor suffers the most. So we got a little bit of that from Dabi, but we also got a major reveal of what Dabi has done when Gigantomachia destroyed the mansion. Because as Dabi is explaining how Toga is going to be playing a major role in taking down this world and making sure that they have the last laugh, it is revealed that when Gigantomachia broke out of the building, that Dabi, Toya, was able to grab a sample of Twice's blood, and how most likely Toga is going to transform into Twice and be able to use his quirk. Now, what does this imply? It implies that Twice is going to be resurrected, and that now they will have a resurrected Twice. They'll have an army of villains on their side. Okay, that's bad. We thought that the heroes may have had the upper hand. Oh, no, the villains have an upper hand. This is something that the heroes will have no idea that they can do, and it's going to be a bloodbath. But Twice is coming back. Yay! Also, Twice is coming back. Yay. Don't get me wrong, I love Twice, but his powers are broken, and the heroes are going to have a very harder fight taking him down now that Toga has his blood and can, in theory, resurrect him. So that's another discussion altogether. The ramifications of bringing back someone that's dead, like legitimately bringing them back. But that's not even the half of the chapter. Technically it is, but we still got a lot to discuss. So yeah, After that major revelation, we actually cut back over to Spinner, Skeptic, and All For One as Spinner is hearing the cries of Shigaraki, and he's very concerned about him. And as he goes to see if Shigaraki is okay, as we see just an entire area covered in blood, we actually get a small image or a panel of Shigaraki of his left hand that has 5 fingers. Oh, Shigaraki has 5 fingers now. Or he's growing 3 more fingers. You know, the fingers that he lost. There's a lot to say about this one panel. And this could be a discussion on its own. For starters, this means that Star and Stripe's death was quote-unquote in vain, because now Shigaraki is going to be more powerful because now he'll be able to decay using all 10 of his fingers. That's another discussion for another day, but what is very interesting about this, and this is something that All For One brings up, is that Shigaraki is about to overcome the quirk singularity, as you have Spinner that is very concerned about Shigaraki, as you have Skeptic chiming in and saying how, Spinner, you're going to be the person to enact Redestro's plan. You realize that when it comes to your kind, and there's some slight racism that you can imply from Skeptic at this moment, but that's besides the point. Pretty much what Skeptic is saying is that Spinner is going to be the symbol. He's going to be the figurehead. He's going to be the leader that Redestro was, and he's going to enact Redestro's plan, and how he is going to be the one to pave the way for the Paranormal Liberation Army. And he says some interesting things, and I'll get into that a little bit more, but he hands him a device that is pretty much going to be the device used to quote-unquote pull the trigger, and pretty much he is going to be the one to commence this war, as we have him being handed a device that will be used most likely to communicate with everyone and enact the plan. You just have All For One saying that the step he is going to take will bring hope to everyone. And by everyone, he's specifically talking about the people that are going to serve him. So after that, we do get a lot of Spinner when it comes to his growth, his development, his characterization, where he finally accepts that they're not going to care about what he thinks, and that there's no stopping this anymore, that whatever is going to happen, that he's going to do it not for himself, but for the sake of Shigaraki, and how he's going to be the one to pull this trigger. So you have the end of this chapter where you have All For One telling Iguchi, Spinner, that anyone can become someone else's hero, as it's revealed that this is going to be a trigger to alert all of the Paranormal Liberation Army members to either assemble or go on the attack, where we actually get to see a fair amount of familiar faces, where we are actually revealed that the sludge villain from the beginning of this story has joined the villain side and has escaped. And it's that in My Hero Academia, the discrimination has always been there, but it's been a lot more subtler than we think. And that mainly comes from the reveal that the sludge villain is here, and a line that I didn't bring up is that the idea that a lot of villains who enact these plans or are villains are actually mutant-typed quirked people or heteromorphic individuals. And you may be thinking, is that actually the case? But in reality, it is. I'll probably dive into this a little bit more in a different discussion video, but you have a character like Gang Orca, who was the top 10 hero, but was also labeled the #1 hero that looks like a villain. And you may be thinking, is it because of the dark clothing? Is it because of his demeanor? It could just be because he's a heteromorphic quirk user. As well as, like I said, the first villain that we see All Might face is the sludge villain, which is a heteromorphic quirk user. As well as the fact that the first villains that we really see in the series are heteromorphic quirk users. The sludge villain, the gigantification villain, even though his quirk may be transformation, quirks have a physical capability of changing the person's appearance. Even the guy who the other heroes couldn't face, who had like this big like muscular build with no neck, was defeated by All Might in an instant. And that is only a few examples of it. There are a lot more examples of villains in the story having heteromorphic quirks or having heteromorphic traits that may cause them to be discriminated against and become villains. So that is a totally different discussion that we could have on that, and I probably will. But when it comes to this chapter, I think this is probably one of the best chapters that we've gotten, if not this year, because we've only gotten like 2 or 3, but probably the best chapter that we've gotten in a while. I'm not saying that the chapters that we have gotten from My Hero Academia are bad, they have been good, but this is a step above them. Because a lot of this chapter talks about the characterization, the growth and development of the villains such as Toga, Spinner, Dabi, getting more characterization, getting more growth, and getting a better understanding of who they are as characters, and showing what their goals are, which are, for the most part, now just destroying this society for the sake of Shigaraki. So there's a lot to glean from that, and there's a lot to glean from Toga's upbringing and her psychology, the psychology of Dabi and Spinner, the singularity idea, how All for One inside of Shigaraki is going to grow past the singularity theory in the same vein as how One for All has done so as well, showing that they are truly and potentially what can happen when a quirk exceeds the point of singularity. That is something else that we see in this chapter, as well as the fact that the potential discrimination that we've seen in the series has always been there, but been done so in more subtler means, is very interesting. So there's a lot that we can get from this chapter, and I know I've been saying this for a while, but I'm probably going to make separate videos on what we got in this chapter because there's just a lot to cover, and I can't really cover it all in a reasonable amount of time in this review. But overall, I thought this was a very interesting, very amazing, very great chapter of My Hero Academia, and it's fun that this is a great chapter of My Hero Academia, and it's primarily focused on the villains. So yeah, I think most likely what's going to happen is that we may get a little bit of follow-up after this, but I think that we're immediately going to cut over back to the heroes. We may see Spinner pull the trigger, but I think that within the next few chapters, we're about to go into a full-blown war. And unfortunately, My Hero Academia is going to be on break next week, but it's going to be fine. We're going to be discussing a lot from this chapter, and I can't wait to do that. So, let me ask you, what did you think of this chapter? Did you like that we focused a lot on the villains? And let me ask you, who is your favorite characterized villain in this chapter? Was it Spinner? Was it Toga? Was it Dabi? Or even All for One? Leave your thoughts down in the comments down below. Leave a like on the video if you liked it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to see more content like this. And don't forget to hit the notification bell to be notified whenever I upload more content like this. Do all that cool jazz! And hopefully, I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!